registered dietitian and certified specialist in sports dietetics, and I'm a regional wellness manager for Bon Appetit Management Company. Today, I'm also joined by Jeremy Alfonso. He is a virtual performance coach with EXOS, and we're going to be tackling together some of the top nutrition related myths, but also fad diets. Jeremy is going to be chiming in with some really great practical fitness tips that relate to each of these fad diets if you find that you are currently on them or consider using them in the future. Before we get started today, I just want to preface and say that the goal of today's presentation is really just to inform you and provide you with the facts of what makes up balanced nutrition, the facts behind some of these fad diets that have gained popularity and lost some, and then also some very common nutrition myths. So, like I said, we got quite a bit on the agenda, but before we can even dive into some nutrition myths and fad diets, we really want to dive into and define what a healthy and balanced diet is. Then we're going to be reviewing some of the most common and popular fad diets, the pros and cons of each eating pattern. And then Jeremy is going to be chiming in with his fitness-related tips for each corresponding fad diet. Lastly, we're going to be going over some common nutrition myths, and we're going to separate fact from fiction. So let's get into it. So what makes a healthy, balanced diet? You hear the word healthy thrown around a lot, especially online and when it comes to a lot of these fad diets. But let's start by defining what it really is. A healthy and balanced diet is one that contains a variety of fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains, healthy fats, and the occasional treat. It's all about balance. Now, it's important to get all of these different food sources in throughout the day and to eat a wide variety of foods of different colors to ensure that you're getting all the nutrients that you need, both macronutrients and also micronutrients. So some of the smaller, more essential vitamins and minerals that we need for regular bodily functions. And how do we do that? How do we create a balanced plate and a healthy plate, right, with these principles of a balanced diet? Well, as I mentioned, you need some of your main key components, which are your macronutrients, which are your carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are good to have and include in your diet. They're your body's preferred energy source, and they help fuel your brain and also your muscle. Then it comes to protein. Proteins are the building blocks of our cells and tissues, and they help keep us satiated after meals. So protein is another key component. And also healthy fats. Fats are actually crucial for cell structure and also help with satiety of keeping you full and even help you absorb fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. Now, carbohydrates, protein, and healthy fats together are called macronutrients. And again, we'll kind of touch on their different roles. And these are the key big pieces that we want to focus in on. But like I said, we also want to focus in on getting a lot of different color and variety throughout our diet to give us those micronutrients, those smaller vitamins, minerals, electrolytes, and things that we may not tend to focus on as much. So what is another principle of a balanced diet? Well, it's choosing whole foods. So this means choosing whole foods whenever possible. You want to try to shop locally and within the seasons whenever possible. Not only do whole foods tend to be higher in nutrient content, but if you're shopping within current seasons of when fruits and vegetables are ripest and at their best, they also tend to taste better as well. You want to make sure that you limit highly processed foods and foods that have highly refined sugars and also simple carbohydrates. Now, simple carbohydrates have a time and place in our diet. A simple carbohydrate is any type of carb that is basically low on fiber, right? So you can think of something like, a piece of white bread compared to whole grain bread, right? That fiber is going to provide some more micronutrients, but also help keep you full for a longer period of time. And you also want to ensure that the fats that you intake throughout your diet predominantly come from plant-based fats. So you want to try to limit any animal-based fats. Things like cream and butter can be used in moderation, but again, you want to have plant-based ones be your default option. Now, another principle of a balanced, healthy diet is portion control. Now, our bodies have kind of our internal portion control and limiting abilities, and we do that through our hunger cues. So if you haven't done this before, try listening to your own body's cues about what it craves and how much it needs. Now, it takes practice to recognize these signals, but over time, you will learn how much and how often your body needs to refuel. The final principle is really to focus on choosing plants first. So choose a diet that's rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and pulses, things like lentils and beans, nuts and seeds. You want to try to make meat a complementary part of your meal, but not the main event, like we're kind of traditionally raised to have that view, especially here in the United States. It does sound corny, but try to eat the rainbow because, again, consuming foods with multiple different colors are going to ensure that you're getting the correct amount of vitamins, minerals, and also other phytonutrients. So now that we've kind of laid the groundwork for what a balanced and healthy diet is, let's start to separate some fact from fiction and dive into some of the more popular fad diets that we tend to see around these days. The first one up is a raw vegan diet. So if you haven't heard about it, a raw vegan diet eliminates all animal products and any foods that are cooked above 118 degrees temperature. Raw vegans or raw foodists believe that food cooked above this temperature loses its nutritional value. So some of the key principles are no animal products, including meat, dairy, seafood, eggs, honey, or any other product or byproduct that was made by animals. No vegan foods that have been processed under high heat, including pastas and grains and other vegan snacks that require a little bit more high processing. Some of what it really emphasizes is a high vegetable and fruit intake, really leaning on nuts and seeds, roots and squash, sprouts, herbs, spices, different seasonings, and also seaweed. It does allow some lightly processed foods, things like cold pressed oils, unprocessed olives, or fermented foods, things like miso or kimchi. And it does also allow certain juices and herbal teas. So some of the pros of a raw vegan diet is that it's very high in fruits and vegetables, which is really one of the foundations of a healthy diet, like we just discussed. It really focuses on utilizing whole foods and minimal processing, trying to minimize how many processed foods are consumed whenever possible. Some of the cons for this diet are it's very restrictive and it can be difficult to eat out or on the go, especially in a setting that's a little bit more social with friends or coworkers. And it also does happen to eliminate many of the healthier foods because of preparing with heat or processing. So in fact, some foods actually have a higher nutrient absorption after heating, which is the opposition to the raw vegan philosophy. I'm going to pass it to Jeremy to give you some practical tips as it relates to physical fitness if you were to follow a raw vegan diet.
Thank you, London. Yeah, so very interesting to hear about the raw vegan diet. And the first thing that comes to mind as a fitness professional when we want to talk about how to supplement ourselves, or more so just feed ourselves with the availability of what we have, is to prioritize and plan ahead for some post-workout recovery, specifically protein. And the reason we suggest this is because the availability of the items that you may have. For example, you're going to the gym, it's away from your home. You have to make sure you bring the stuff with you. And again, you're looking to repair and rebuild the muscle after you break it down in any style of workout, whether it's cardiovascular based or even resistance training. For that reason, you always want to prioritize the protein to help you rebuild and repair. And again, it's going to be a little bit limited if we're following the raw vegan diet. So always important to prioritize and plan ahead. And again, making sure you're getting something in your body after that workout. Thank you, Len.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Love those tips. And then going on to our next one, Whole30 eating plan is a 30-day reset that eliminates many foods thought to cause cravings, blood sugar spikes, gut discomfort, and inflammation. So the idea is that after completing 30 days on Whole30, dieters then introduce one of the eliminated food groups every few days and then kind of go back to their normal pattern of eating. Some of the pillars of the Whole30 diet are to eat real foods, vegetables, some fruit, moderate meat, seafood and eggs, plenty of natural fats, herbs, spices, and seasonings. Some of the foods that are omitted are going to be added sugar, whether it's real or artificial, no alcohol, even for cooking. Do not eat grains of any kind, so no wheat, barley, rye, farro, quinoa, etc. They also omit legumes, so no beans, peas, chickpeas, lentils, and even peanuts. Peanut is a legume, if you did not know. Also, no dairy, no carrageenan, MSG, or sulfates, and also no baked goods or treats with approved ingredients. So there is kind of a longer list, but the whole goal is just eat whole foods, things that are more naturally found in nature and require less processing. So some of the key focuses of Whole30 is that it focuses on whole food, emphasis on vegetables, eliminates added sugars and alcohol. It can be very restrictive, that eliminates major food groups. It can be costly, right? Especially if you're buying lots of whole meats, fruits, and vegetables, and it does not include a comprehensive plan to reintroduce foods. Now, some fitness tips.
So as we look at the Whole30 fad diet itself and ways that it adjusts our body, the one thing that you want to give yourself time is patience and time to adjust to maybe a change of energy because of the restrictive pattern that it has, especially in the beginning of Whole30. Most of us don't realize how much sugar we actually intake on a daily basis. And so once you start Whole30, that reduction in the amount of sugar that we take is going to have a toll on our body, more so the energy that we have. So give yourself time to adjust, but also maybe tailor the program or the workouts that you have to make them less demanding on the body, at least initially when starting Whole30.
Thank you, Jeremy. Awesome. Next on our list is the Paleo Diet. So this one has been fairly popular over the last few years, but it's a lot less, people have been a lot less interested over the last few with some of the newer fad diets that are out. So followers of the Paleo Diet believe that returning to a diet similar to us being hunter-gatherer humans in the Paleolithic era has a better health outcome because our bodies did not evolve to digest many of the foods that make up our diets today. So the Paleo Diet involves omission of most grains, especially any gluten-containing grains, things like wheat, barley, and rye, the omission of legumes, including beans, peas, and pulses. They omit dairy, and some of the things that it encourages is a high vegetable intake, some fruits and nuts, a very high animal protein intake, and it also emphasizes a very high fat intake, including animal fats, even like lard. So some of the pros of the paleo diet is that there is a strong focus on whole foods like fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. There is no refined or added sugars, and it does promote a high vegetable intake. Some of the cons of paleo diet is the avoidance of whole grains, beans, pulses, and nuts, which are very nutrient-dense foods that are also beneficial for anyone who's living more of a plant-based lifestyle. And the diet can also be very high in saturated fat due to not only the excess amount of animal protein, but also promotion of animal-based fats or fats that tend to be higher in saturated fat, things like lard and coconut oil.
So when it comes to some paleo diet fitness tips, it's important to look back at to what are the pros, the cons, and what are we limited on, and what can we eat. Although there is a lack or a demonization of the whole grains, they definitely want you to have a lot of high vegetable intake, which is going to lead to probably a lot of fiber intake. So you want to be wary of too much fiber or fat specifically before a workout because you don't want that feeling of fullness while you're working. What's important to remember is that you want to give yourself a window of time. Think about maybe 30 to 60 minutes prior to your workout, something that's a snack, something small. But again, be careful of how much fiber or fat you have in that snack before you work out. That way, it's not bugging you during the workout itself.
Awesome. Speaking of fat, now that brings us to our keto diet. So this one has been really popular over the last few years. Most everyone has heard about the keto diet. But if you haven't, the ketogenic diet is a low carb, moderate protein, and high fat eating plan that is really designed to shift your metabolic state into what's called ketosis. When ketones produced by your liver become your body's primary energy source instead of the glucose that we get from ingesting carbohydrates. So proponents of the keto diet claim that using fat and ketones for energy will lead to weight loss, increased energy, and mental clarity. For those of you who didn't know, the keto diet was originally created actually for patients that suffered from epileptic seizures. So this was its original use, and then they started seeing that some people did tend to lose a little bit of weight as kind of a side effect from that diet. But in order to achieve that state of ketosis, it has to be very specific that the diet has to be 70% or more of fat, 25% protein, and you need to restrict carbohydrates to less than 5% of your total diet or 15 grams or less per day. So some of the foods that the keto diet encourages you to avoid are, of course, grains, so any starchy carbohydrate, natural sugars, some fruits, starchy vegetables, things like potatoes, and also legumes. Foods that they do encourage you to eat are meat, seafood, eggs, leafy greens, and any above ground vegetables, nuts, seeds, avocados, and also different types of fats, things like coconut oil, plant-based oils, and then using alternative sweeteners, things like stevia or artificial sweeteners that do not have carbohydrates inside of them. So some of the pros of a keto diet is that the diet has shown promise in, like I mentioned, children with epileptic seizures. Some newer studies are looking at signs of improvement in sports performance, but since carbohydrates are still our body's main preferred source of energy, there is still much more research that's needed to find out which sports it may be seen either acceptable or effective within. Some of the cons of a keto diet is that it's very restrictive. It does almost completely eliminate all grains and starchy carbohydrates. Very high fat intake, especially for saturated fats, which are generally found in animals. And it's also not the body's preferred metabolic state. So any excess carbohydrates may revert the body back to using glucose as fuel. Like I said, those cutoffs are very stringent that you need to meet in order to put your body in a state of ketosis, which can be challenging if you're eating out or at social events with friends.
Now, when it comes to the keto diet fitness tips, some of you may have already noticed, and as London alluded to, that it's going to be high in fat. So it's going to be very similar to what the Whole30 restrictions were, or I guess some of the fitness tips that we thought of, which is it could leave you pretty full. On top of that, though, is that you want to think about the type of exercise that you're going to go through in regards to your energy demands. You want to try and incorporate less high intensity exercise due to the lack of carbohydrates, because again, you're not going to have that energy to provide for the high demand of the workout itself. So stick to something a little bit more low intensity. We recommend any steady state type of exercise, cardiovascular activity, for example, treadmill walking.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. That brings us to one of our last fad diets, which is intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting is an eating pattern that cycles between periods of eating and fasting. So there's several different methods to approach this, and we're going to go through some of those different methods. The key part with intermittent fasting, though, and what separates it from some of the other fad diets, it doesn't specify which foods you should eat, but it rather specifies when you should be eating your foods. So some of the most popular intermittent fasting eating patterns, the most popular is the 16-8 method. It's also called the lean gains protocol, and it involves skipping breakfast and restricting your daily eating period to only 8 hours throughout the day. So people will adjust this to whatever best reflects their schedules. An example is only eating between the hours of 1 to 9 p.m. And then again, you're fasting for all other hours in between. Things like black coffee are permitted and water is permitted, but you're not allowed to have cream or sugar. You should not be ingesting any other form of carbohydrate or form of energy during your fasting period. There are a few other methods for intermittent fasting, which are a little bit less popular. There's the eat and stop method, eat, stop, eat, which involves fasting just for one day throughout the week or twice throughout the week, and then eating regularly throughout the rest of the week. And then kind of the same thing with the 5 and 2 diet. It's a method where you only consume 500 to 600 calories on 2 non-consecutive days of the week, but then eat normally the other 5 days. So there are quite a few interesting pros and cons to this. The main pro that is driven from intermittent fasting is that it can make it easier for some people to maintain a caloric deficit, which can then sometimes result in weight loss, right? So if you're restricting the time periods that you're eating, it's generally harder to consume an excess amount of calories within that time window. Some people, they can, right? Depending on how hungry you are. And it may be a little bit more challenging, but in general, weight loss to some degree is calories in versus calories out. Some of the cons, though, are that the restrictive time windows may be really challenging to adhere for the long term. Whenever you're considering a diet, it should really be looking at a lifestyle that you could maintain for the long run. Also, if it presents some challenges for individuals who are looking to build lean body mass. And the main reason for that is because you have a restricted time window. In order to build lean body mass, you need to really spread your protein consumption throughout the day. Most individuals have kind of an upper limit. We set the precedent that protein is really used to help us rebuild broken down muscle tissue, right? From either, being regularly worked or through a strenuous workout. Well, that doesn't just mean that we can save one giant, I'll just throw out like one giant chicken breast or one large steak or one large piece of tofu for the night after our workout and enjoy that in one sitting. All of that protein will not be dedicated to repairing the muscle tissue. Only about 30 to 40 grams of that protein is dedicated for muscle rebuilding, tissue, and repair, which is why some of the most consistent advice is to have smaller meals that are spread out further throughout the day, because it gives your body more time and more opportunity to spread out your protein consumption and then utilize that protein for muscle building purposes. If we go outside of that threshold, like the example that I stated with just eating one large sitting of a high protein food, you would get that 30 to 40 grams for muscle building, and then all the excess protein that you consumed after that would be stored as fat and reserved for energy for later use.
So when
Also,
sorry about that,
sorry,
Lemon.
Jeremy.
Keep going. Go
No,
ahead.
you're all
Sorry
good.
about that.
All good. One last thing I wanted to mention on intermittent fasting, it is very risky for certain individuals that have certain health conditions or restrictions. Specifically, it's not recommended and could be dangerous for any mothers that are breastfeeding, any individuals that have kidney stones, and also any individuals that have type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And lastly, it's also not recommended for any individual that has a history of eating disorders or other complicated medical problems. Back to you, Jeremy.
There we go. All right. So for intermittent fasting, what's really the key word I think it's important to remember here, and going back to the raw vegan diet, is prioritization, right? Making sure that you can prioritize when you eat, because the intermittent fasting fad diet is, again, more about when and less about what, even though both of those things are important. So making sure that you plan your workouts around your meals, right? Typically, it's kind of the other way around, but finding out, okay, this is when I'm going to work out. Well, this means that I need to have my meal either before or after this specific time. If you do plan on working out while you're fasted, which is a common theme, we would opt for cardio instead of doing maybe resistance training, only because the lack of macronutrients that you have available for your workout itself. Also important that if you do plan on doing something fasted as a workout, then you need to eat immediately after. The body is craving carbs and protein, and so you want to make sure that you can give that body what it needs after you finish the workout.
Awesome. All right, this is officially our last fad diet. We saved the best for last. It's actually the Mediterranean diet. So this diet has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Mediterranean diet it reflects traditional diets that are found in countries surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. So this this diet is very high in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and with meat and seafood playing a secondary role. It's also very rich in healthy fats, and it also limits sugar and added sugars. So it includes primarily plant-based foods like vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, and whole grains. Healthy fats like olives and plant-based oils are preferred above animal fats like butter. And there's a big emphasis on meals as social occasions with friends and family. Some of the pros of a Mediterranean diet are that they are consistently named one of the best diets overall for health and disease prevention. There's been countless studies done on the Mediterranean diet. If you would like to find further information, research Blue Zones and Mediterranean diet. It's where some of the areas of individuals that live the longest and some of the best quality of life follow a Mediterranean diet. It also promotes a variety of foods, like I mentioned, and it doesn't really eliminate any food groups. And it really highlights the important social aspect of food. As far as cons, there's not really many cons to this diet. It really is a very balanced approach that tends to work for a wide array of different people.
All right, so when it comes to the Mediterranean diet and some fitness tips, really, we just love this overall aspect in terms of, I guess a word I can think of here is maintenance. Because it's ideal for common goals like fat loss or gaining strength. So you can go in either direction. It just takes a little bit of fine tuning with the way that you work the Mediterranean diet. Something that we do recommend, though, is giving yourself more time to prepare the food, because that could be a possible issue if you have some time constraints. But in regards to what to eat before and after, I think it really depends on what you are into. But there's plenty of options for either before or after the workout. It's just about finding what your goals are within that nutrition-based Mediterranean diet itself.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Now that we've gone through the fad diets, we're going to be going through some quick nutrition myths where you can kind of think to yourself, fact or fiction. Okay, so you may have heard of some of these, some of them you may have not. Fact or fiction, grazing on and weight. Well, eating more often can mean keeping your metabolism going, but it can also mean consuming more calories if your meal portions are out of control. So ultimately, it's important to learn what works best for your body, and by experimenting and seeing how you feel after large and small meals throughout the day. Some of the tried and true metabolism hacks that are proven and backed by science to work are eat within 30 minutes to 1 hour of waking up. This is breaking the fast. So start your morning and your digestion off right by eating within 1 hour of waking up, ideally. This does kind of wake up our digestive system and start to rev our metabolism. Another hack that you can use is learn to recognize your hunger cues. Hunger doesn't feel the same for every person and every day. So hunger can present itself in the form of headaches, fatigue, loss of clear thinking, and other physical signs. Most people need to eat, sorry, y'all. Most people need to eat 3 to 5 times per day. The average person needs to eat periodically throughout the day, up to 5 times. This may mean 3 meals and 2 snacks, 5 smaller meals, or even something in between. Like I said, experiment and find what works best for you. And then lastly, another hack is stay hydrated to starve off hunger. So sometimes thirst can be mistaken for hunger because our body is predominantly made up of water. So once you start to feel a little bit hungry, you start getting some of that urge to reach for a snack. Try having a sip of water, maybe between 4 to 8 ounces. Wait 10 minutes and see how you feel afterwards. If you're no longer hungry, you may have just been dehydrated. Another fact for you, fact or fiction, everyone will benefit from a gluten-free diet. It can give you more energy, help with weight loss, and even treat autism. This is actually false. So a gluten-free diet means a diet without grains that contain the protein gluten, which include grains like wheat, barley, and rye. That means avoiding foods like breads, doughs, and cereal containing grains such as farro and couscous, and other gluten-containing ingredients like soy sauce or other processed products. Now, celiac disease is an autoimmune disease in which the body is unable to process gluten and it attacks the lining of the digestive tract, which leads to issues like diarrhea or constipation, weight loss, fatigue, and poor nutrient absorption, and depression, amongst many other issues. People with celiac disease must completely avoid any gluten-containing foods for life. So a gluten-free diet is very pertinent for those individuals. The other set of individuals where a gluten-free diet would be pertinent is for those who are known as gluten sensitive. So it's a slightly less defined condition, but some of the symptoms that people experience are fatigue, digestive issues, muscle cramps, headaches, and other symptoms. So it's important to not self-diagnose where you kind of fall on this spectrum, right? It's important not to self-diagnose yourself with celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. So if you do believe that you have issues with gluten, it's recommended to speak with a registered dietitian or your physician so that they can conduct more assessments and tests to really determine if there's any other underlying causes or if a gluten-free diet is pertinent for you. Outside of the individuals that we mentioned, a gluten-free diet is not necessarily recommended. One other fact or fiction for you all is carbohydrates are bad for you. This has been touted around social media, especially with the prevalence of the ketogenic diet. And let's answer that question once and for all. Are carbohydrates bad? Well, this is actually false. As we mentioned in the beginning, carbohydrates get a bad rap, but in fact, carbs are our body's preferred source of energy. They're more than just breads and pastas. Almost all foods contain some carbohydrates, but some come in the form of sugars and whole and refined grains. So again, it's not the food themselves that's bad. It all comes down to moderation, ensuring that we're not consuming one macronutrient in excess of all of the others. Some of the health benefits of complex carbohydrates are that they are nutritionally dense. They're a great source of fiber, which help keep us regular. They're heart healthy for that very reason as well. And they also increase satiety or a sense of fullness. So carbohydrates offer a host of health benefits and should be a part of a well-balanced diet. All right. Thank you all for sticking with us. We would like to open it up now for final questions.
While anyone puts any questions in the chat or wants to come off mute, just want to thank London and Jeremy for your time. Some great insight, both on nutrition and how fitness correlates to that nutritional diet that you may be looking to follow. So thank you again. I'll give people a couple minutes here. We will make the recording available. The EXOS coaches will put this on our YouTube page as well, so you can access it there if you want to refer to it. I do see one question in there from Peter. He provides any thoughts on dietary supplements?
Great question, and I'd be happy to answer that, Peter. So what I would say, and what I normally tell my clients too, is a dietary supplement is meant to do exactly that. So it should be used to help supplement our diet when we cannot get some of those sources from real foods, right? So an example of any sort of supplement, right? It could be a multivitamin, it could be protein powder. So the preference for our bodies and what I would suggest is it's always best to see if we can get one of those nutrients from whole foods first. So if you're looking for protein, right, look at your both plant-based and animal-based protein sources and try to get enough throughout the day. If you find that you have a really busy day and you may be lacking in that area, then a supplement may be warranted. And it's the same things with vitamins and minerals, right? So a daily multivitamin may not hurt, but the best way to get all of those micronutrients is by eating a variety of different foods with different colors as well. Um, be careful with supplements. Do make sure to read product and ingredient labels. The supplement industry is not really regulated by the USDA, so there are a lot of risks with some supplements if they're not certified by a third-party vendor like USB Labs or another alternative. So if you're going to choose a supplement, try to look for a third-party certification, and when in doubt, try to choose whole foods whenever possible. Great question.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, London. Appreciate that. I don't see any other questions. So if you
Oh, sorry, Blake. Didn't mean to cut you off. I actually do have a question for you, London. I guess it's a little funny coming from me since we did the presentation together, but it's just something that popped into my head. I've experienced the intermittent fasting fad diet before personally, and I've heard a lot of conflicting reports about if coffee is okay or not. Only because I assume to me that it kickstarts my metabolism, or at least I feel like it does. So, and I remember you saying that some things are permitted, like black coffee. So is there a hard, fast rule on that? Is it still being debated, or, what in pertaining to the intermittent fasting fad diet itself?
It's a great question, Jeremy, because I think many of our attendees may have the same question. It is kind of a hard, fast rule that if you are fasting, the only beverages that you would want to consume within the window that you're fasting are those that are plain water or black coffee. If you start adding anything to your plain black coffee, like sugar, cream, even if you add coconut oil, right? That's going to break the fast because you're introducing something into your body that your body now needs to break down. So for anyone who is considering utilizing that dietary approach, black coffee and water are, I believe, the beverages that are permitted within outside of your fasting window. During your fasting window, though, anything is completely allowed.
Awesome. Thank you, London.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm going to pop in here. We got a question from Jason. Sorry, Blake, I just took over. Any comments on omega-6 and omega-3 ratios?
Great question. Honestly, I do recall seeing research studies that have suggestions for certain ratios of omega-3s to omega-6s. In all honesty, I don't recall the exact ratio off the top of my head. What I usually advise is try to get omega-3 fatty acids. I believe that you want a 2-to-1 ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s. I would have to double check my notes though, just to be completely sure. But again, the way that you introduce those fats into your diet are by eating an abundance of foods, right? So eating foods like walnuts, plant-based oils and fats, and then also fatty fish, things like salmon or even sardines packed in oil. So I would worry less about the ratio, but more about consuming those foods with our healthy fats.
Yes, thank you, London and Jeremy. All this talk about nutrition, I know people are getting hungry, getting close to lunchtime. Do want to remind people, thank you, Trevor, for putting in the chat. For those that are participating in Nutrition Bingo, send your card to Trevor at his email address there. You can find that also in the Slack channel. He's posted that several times, so you can get that there. But thank you all. It doesn't look like any other questions. Again, we'll have this recording posted on the SRA Wellness YouTube page. And then one final plug, we'll let Trevor chime in here for the April
Just
Mileage
gonna
Madness.
Jump in. Thank you so much, Blake, for hosting, and Jeremy and London for presenting as well. Great job handling all the questions and presenting the content in an understandable manner. Appreciate you both. Just want to jump in and plug next month's program. Like Blake said, we're doing Mileage madness next month in April. This is a mileage, quote unquote, accumulation challenge. We're challenging you to accumulate at least 5 miles of physical activity over the course of 3 weeks, starting on the 10th of April. And this challenge will run through the 1st of May. So you got 3 weeks to get 5 miles, earn some share care points if you're a full timer. It's a great deal. We've been posting about this in the Slack channel. I'll send the sign up link, registration link to the quick Survey Monkey right here in the chat. Just put in your name and email and you can join us. It's super easy. We'll send out a file that will automatically convert like minutes of physical activity to mileage distance as well. So even if you're just doing like yoga or a gym workout, that counts. We'll have it covered. So love to have you join us, see how many miles we can compile throughout the month individually and collectively. So I hope you guys will join us for that. Signing up does complete one of your nutrition bingo squares. So that's all I got. Thank you guys again, and thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, guys. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.